is our honor to host the 2018 budget address for the city of St. Paul. At this time, I ask that you all please rise for a presentation of the colors. Presenting the colors for today's occasion, please welcome St. Paul Honor Guard. In addition, singing our national anthem is Ms. Ava McFarland. Ava is a front woman of our own neo-soul band and just performed a lead role in Minneapolis opera Mother King. She works at Walker West and is a student at University of St. Thomas.
Honor guard. Hot tip. Look. Right shoulder. Hump. At the half step. Forward. Arch. Follow left. Turn. Part time. Turn. Detail. Up. Left. Pace. Breathe in. Pump.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Order. Pump. Right. Pace. At the half step. Forward. Turn. Call left. Turn. Detail. Halt. Dismissed.
You may be seated. Thank you, St. Paul Honor Guard and Ava. This next guest is a special individual in our community. Author of the upcoming collection, Softer, published by True Art Speaks and Arcada Press, Mr. Dante Collins, who is the inaugural Youth Poet Laureate for the city of St. Paul, a highly recognized writer and performer. Mr. Collins was born in the heart of Rondo community and aspires to see and participate in ongoing efforts to make the city great. Please join me in welcoming Dante to read his poem, Footnotes for the Future.
Thank you for welcoming my voice into this space. Footnotes for the future. And if love is the destination, let it also be the vehicle, the wind and the sail that carry our tattered bodies to its shore. And if love is the bandage, let it also clean the wound. Let it kneel before the bleeding and offer its two good hands. If not this new courage, give me a new country, brave and borderless, winged and running. If not a new law, we will take new land or the land back. Dream of some new world that is peaceful beyond our sleep. Here, we outlive our fathers. Here, we watch the sunset and make it home for dinner. Here, we wear hoodies and hijabs and dance carelessly in the rain. Here, laughter is our first language. No gun or early grave robs us of our names. We do not trade our cradles too soon for caskets. Here, we walk each other home. Not because we fear the violence hiding in the night, but because, my God, we know love is a thing with calloused feet. We know love rises early to water the garden, turns the porch light on before bed. We know love as the most honest law. Would you like to come? Can you trade who you think I am for who I am? And isn't that true compassion? Compassion, a song sitting like a small sun in the mouth. Compassion is a word that takes the entire body to pronounce. It is to say, my soul celebrates you. It is to say, your hurt is my hurt. How can I help us heal? And look at this new country we've built, fast and feathered, plentiful and pulsing. Would you like to come? This contagious empathy, you field of ready doves. I too wish to build a wall, to keep out anything not forged by love. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dante, for that thoughtful reading. As I mentioned earlier, I am the president of this incredible institution, and I am so pleased to be with you all today and introduce you to our main speaker. His honest leadership has brought progress to the city of St. Paul. He has been a longtime advocate and champion of education, job access, and economic opportunity. His commitment to support education at all stages of life, including 2- and 4-year learning, apprenticeship, and technical training, with a focus to narrow racial disparities, has made him a strong ally of St. Paul College. This is his 12th and final budget address as a mayor. I am pleased to introduce you all to my friend, our mayor, Chris Coleman.
Well, thank you so much, Rasul, for your hosting us here today and for your kind introduction. I just want to pause for a second and just give another shout out for these two young artists. I mean, that kind of makes me proud of what's happening in St. Paul when I hear that. It is a privilege to be with you here in this place where lives are changed on a daily basis and our community is strengthened every single day. It's a school that recognizes that accessibility to education has the power to transform every student you serve. Thank you, Rasul, for your being a tireless champion for the thousands of students who are here looking for their first rung on the ladder of opportunity. We come together today as our country is in the midst of great turmoil. This past week's violence in Charlottesville reminds us that our great nation has not yet healed the wounds of centuries of racism. We must acknowledge that we have not fully realized the promise of emancipation proclaimed by President Abraham Lincoln more than 150 years ago. As we struggle with the scenes of aggression and violence over the last few days, we must acknowledge that we are facing a moral crisis in cities and towns across this country. From our neighborhoods to our most senior national leadership, there is no place for bigotry in our communities, nor our government. As mayor of St. Paul for the past 12 years, racial equity has been an important lens through which I have viewed every decision and policy that we have made. We've taken steps towards working towards eliminating bias in our city government, but our work is far from done. This is not just an issue in far-off corners of America. Right here, we've recently felt the reverberations of the bombing of the Dar al-Farouk Islamic Center. I'm more convinced than ever that our city must make elimination of racism and racial bias a central tenet of everything that we do. I'd like to just take a moment of silence. 3 people lost their lives this weekend. Lieutenant Coleman, State Trooper Berkey, and a young woman, our State Trooper, and Heather Heyer, a young woman. They gave their lives in the cause of racial justice, and I'd like to pause just a moment to honor them. Thank you again for that moment, and thank you for being here, especially to the members of the St. Paul City Council. You know, normally the president of the St. Paul City Council does the introduction, but Councilmember Stark had other plans long made. But I remember when Council President Lantry used to introduce me at these things. She was usually the person for many years, but she never failed to take a moment to just include a little bit of a civics lesson in every introduction that she gave. She would say, the mayor proposes, the city council disposes. I am aware of that fact, but fortunately the process has generally gone pretty well, and it's been very collaborative, and I look forward to working with the council in the months to come to put a budget finally together for 2018. I've learned over the years that it's always kind of a good idea, as you're putting the final touches on a budget, to have someone outside the city, someone with a fresh pair of eyes that hasn't had the investment in the weeks of back and forth going into the writing, looking at the final draft of the budget speech. One year I asked my friend and former office mate Ron Rosenbaum to look at the budget speech. And after reading it, he grimaced and he said, it's too budgety. It's hard to disguise a budget speech. It is what it is. But I'm going to try in Ron's memory to take this up a notch and leave the budgety stuff to the handouts that all of you will receive. This is my 12th budget, as Rasul mentioned. Each one's been a little different. There were the Great Recession budgets. There were the budgets that had big holes because we didn't know what games the state was going to play with local government aid. We had the years where we were struggling just to keep libraries and rec centers open. But every budget was like a giant jigsaw puzzle, unfortunately without the box top that actually has the picture on it. In our hearts, though, we know what we want that picture to be. We know what we want this city to look like. And so, piece by piece, we have put the puzzle together until the picture has fully emerged. This year is no different. We have had some significant and unprecedented challenges, but the picture has taken place. It's a picture of kids eating hot dogs cooked by a cop on a safe summer night, of neighbors sitting under an oak tree on West 7th Street listening to music. It's a young adult getting a first job through the Right Track program, a teen being redirected towards positive engagement by a community ambassador. It's a person working with the Dorothy Day Center to finally find permanent housing after years on the street. It's a hot new restaurant opening in a neighborhood that for years had known only disinvestment. A family sitting on a blanket at CHS Field. A construction worker building a new soccer stadium in the Midway. An immigrant family finding comfort and solace in a city far away from the place that they were born. It's a fourth generation St. Paulite, heading off to one of the great universities of the world with a firm footing built in a St. Paul public school. I kind of know somebody that fits that definition. Each of you adds your own pieces to this puzzle, and it's what makes it so vibrant and so hopeful. Today we're creating the border, finding the edge pieces that hold it all together. We're creating the sound and stable platform upon which to balance the wants, needs, and fiscal realities of our city. That's what it means to lead. It's not just about big rallies and big speeches. Most of the job is sitting in a room, identifying the challenge before you, and building a plan to solve it. As has been said, you run for office in poetry, but you govern in prose. Or in this case, governing is a 462-page budget book that I am presenting to the council today for their consideration. While it has plenty of prose, departmental objectives, performance standards, and the like, it doesn't convey the energy and the optimism that went into drafting it. It's missing the thousands of hours our budget staff and each department leadership team put into it. It's missing the emotion that we felt as we agonized over tough decisions. And it doesn't begin to reflect how hard each department director or chief fought for the resources that they need to advance their missions in their departments. I'd like to ask all of my department directors to stand and be recognized for all of the work that they put in, not just into this budget, but what they do for the city of St. Paul every day. Each of the past 12 years, when I've stood before you to present my budget, there have been 4 constants, and I'll repeat them again. First, state government is failing cities across Minnesota. 764 cities and local governments rely on local government aid to provide critical services and keep property taxes down. Even though there was a little bump in local government aid for St. Paul this year, we're still almost $48 million short had LGA simply kept pace with inflation from 2002 on. I'll continue to fight alongside mayors and leaders of cities and towns across the state of Minnesota to insist that the legislature fully support our communities and live up to their obligation to help hold property taxes down. Second, the demand for city services increases every year. As our population grows, as people age, as state and federal policies change, as our climate creates new challenges. Regardless of outside factors, it's our obligation to find a way to meet the needs of our city. Third, the budgets are structurally balanced. Today's costs will be met with today's resources. No gimmicks, no hiding the ball, and no passing the buck. And finally, we're honest with the people of St. Paul. I can't always guarantee an outcome, but I do guarantee my energy, my effort, and my honesty about what city services cost and what we are asking people to pay. These principles are as true in 2017 as they were in 2006. What's different this year is that the Minnesota Supreme Court ruled late last summer that we could no longer use the right-of-way assessment to collect revenue dedicated to essential services, such as snow plowing, tree trimming, and pothole patching. Remaining true to our budget principles, we've chosen to confront this challenge head-on. Those services that can no longer be supported by the right-of-way fees will be moved to the general fund. Those for which we can continue to collect fees will move to the new street maintenance program. It's important to understand the city is not collecting an additional cent for these services. In fact, the budget that I proposed for 2018 is actually $1.5 million smaller than the 2017 adopted budget. The whole situation, however, reminds us why honesty in budgeting is so critical. 14 years ago, in an effort to deal with a significant reduction in local government aid and the fact that 25% of the property in the city of St. Paul is tax exempt, the right-of-way fee was devised as a mechanism to require all property owners to pay for tree trimming, snow plowing, and other services. Because those costs were shifted onto a fee system, most people saw their property taxes go down. However, this shift didn't really change how much people were paying. It just changed who was paying it and how they were paying it. At the same time property owners received a yellow envelope for their tax bill, they got a blue envelope for their right-of-way bill, which not coincidentally was equal to their property tax savings. There was little difference for the taxpayers, even if the headline suggested that city government was doing more with less. As we push reset on how we pay for street services we depend on, I propose that we rely on a combination of fees and taxes to collect the same amount of revenue. The cost of street lighting and street sweeping, seal coating, and mill and overlays will be assessed to all property owners, including tax-exempt properties such as colleges and universities. Other services like tree trimming and snow plowing will be paid for through property taxes. This means your contribution will be based on the value of your home. Since we can't collect taxes from public buildings or private nonprofit institutions, we have to spread that cost over other property owners. Changing the mix of fees and taxes will mean that your fees will go down, but your taxes may well rise. For some, it will balance out. The average homeowner will pay an additional $12 for services through this system. Property owners who have higher valued homes will have an increase in their taxes that exceeds the decrease in fees. Those who own homes below the median value will see a reduction in the total charges under my proposal. But as a recent editorial in the Star Tribune pointed out, the plan to fill our $30 million budget hole is a sensible way to recoup the funds in a balanced, fair way. The sensible proposal will spread out the tax increase burden, continue to collect some payments from nonprofits, and keep the door open for possible voluntary payments. The switch to the right-of-way program to the general fund will require a 19% increase in the levy. Again, not resulting in one additional dime to the city. But there's more to the city budget than how we pay for snow plowing. We also have to balance how we pay for libraries, for parks, for police and fire, and how we deal with inflation. To meet these needs, I'm proposing a levy increase of 4.9%, which does little more than cover the cost of inflation. With the right-of-way shift and the increase in the additional levy, I'm proposing a levy increase in total of 23.9%. 23.9% is a big number. It's difficult to stand before you and even propose it. But any other choice, however politically expedient in the short term, would have compromised public safety, reversed the progress that we've made in building world-class libraries and parks, and eroded the vibrancy that is allowing and stimulating new investment every day in the city of St. Paul. Any other choice would have passed the problem on to my successor. And while I would have liked to have done that, it wouldn't have been fair. As we look to the future, we have to continue to find innovative ways to grow our tax base and provide opportunities for our tax-exempt properties to contribute to the fiscal well-being of the city of St. Paul. I've asked Sean Kershaw and the Citizens League to examine ways for major tax-exempt property owners, colleges, hospitals, and others to contribute to the cost of city services they consume. I look forward to the report from the Citizens League and working with many tax-exempt properties to create a path forward. During my time as mayor, I've invested in our city's neighborhoods and communities, and we've done it fairly and equitably. Even in an era of tough budget decisions, we deliver quality services to all. We've kept our commitment to that principle by asking outside evaluators to take a look periodically at how we're doing. In 2007, I asked TriData to conduct an audit of the fire department. That report told me that our department was good, but needed improvement. We had to do better at using technology, allocating existing resources, and be more responsive to the needs of our residents. As a result of that study and the investments that we made, the department is much stronger in 2017 than it was in 2007. The budget of the fire department has grown in that time more than 30%. From $46 million to nearly $62 million in my proposed 2018 budget. Average daily staffing grew from 96 to 114. The 2018 budget proposal continues our commitment to the highest level of service in this department. But to make sure we are correctly allocating these resources, the City Council and I asked TriData to come back again and examine our department. We wanted to know if we were allocating resources in the most efficient way possible to deliver the best possible service to our residents. We also asked the auditors to do something that they had never done before. We wanted to know if city services were being delivered equitably across the city, regardless of race, ethnicity, or economic status. The TriData audit confirmed what we had hoped. Fire and ambulance services are being delivered to all neighborhoods across St. Paul in a fair and equitable manner. Response times are excellent, and firefighters, paramedics, and department leaders have a lot to be proud of. But the report also told us that our staffing distribution is unbalanced with regard to the types of calls they're receiving. More than 75% of the 45,000 calls for service were paramedic calls, but our resources are weighted towards putting out fires, not necessarily to medical emergencies. Our fire and paramedic services are among the best in the nation, but our paramedics are being burnt out by the overwhelming growth in ambulance runs. The Tri-Data study makes it very clear. Because of the investments in the department these past 12 years, it has sufficient resources to carry out their mission, but we must shift those resources to better reflect today's needs. My proposed budget adds $1.7 million for the fire department. But despite that budget increase, resources will have to continue to be reallocated within the department to meet our goals for responding to medical emergencies. Chief Butler and the labor leaders of the St. Paul Department have long advocated for increased staffing of super medics, which allows more firefighter paramedics to serve more shifts. We need to add to our super medic capabilities to protect our firefighters and paramedics and provide much needed medical services to our residents. My budget calls for 2 additional super medics and a full-time EMS coordinator position to support those efforts. This will enable the fire department to better meet the growing demand for medical support in our neighborhoods and rebalance the distribution of resources between fire suppression and paramedics. Finally, the department is going to get the health and wellness program that we wanted to create last year, but were unable to fund. The health and wellness program focuses on our firefighters and paramedics so that they can remain healthy and continue to do their job. The Tri-Data report makes recommendations for shifting resources to add the 2 super medics. I'm open to those suggestions. However, I want our chief to work with our labor leaders and our department to review the ideas and come up with possible other suggestions. I'm asking through the labor management team that the chief bring to me a proposal that is budget neutral to meet the ballooning needs for emergency medical services by October 31st of this year. I look forward to working with the department to better serve the needs of the city of St. Paul. My proposed budget for 2018 continues building on investments in our police department. When I was first elected mayor, we had a sworn officer strength of 576. Today, we've grown that force to 620. We invested in crime labs. We've invested in equipment. We've invested in facilities, and we have invested in new equipment for our officers. We're bringing online this year the department's new record management system so that they can more easily track data and more quickly respond to requests. In spite of all the investments that we have made in the department, calls are up and response times are as well. For 2018, I'm proposing to bring our authorized force in my final budget to 626 officers. In doing so, I'm asking the department to very specifically focus these new resources to develop a mental health crisis unit. There are very few departments in this country that have such a unit. We have a noted increase in calls where individuals are in mental health crisis. These calls are time-consuming, they're dangerous for the officers, and they're dangerous for the people in crisis. I've repeatedly heard the need for our police officers to respond to people in crisis differently. The message is coming from residents in community meetings, business owners in discussions about problems downtown, and it's coming from advocates who are working with people who have mental illness and chemical dependency issues. I'm proud of the crisis intervention training that our officers are currently receiving, and the efforts will pay off these efforts to add additional resources will pay off in the future. We currently have only a single officer who is specifically trained to respond to people with mental health and chemical dependency issues, and it's not enough. Under the new mental health crisis unit within the St. Paul Department, each district will have 1 officer assigned, and there will be 2 officers for downtown. This new unit will help to improve outcomes for those experiencing crisis and will allow police officers and police resources to be used more effectively throughout the city. Adding resources during a difficult budget time is a challenge, but I'm particularly grateful for the federal matching funds that allow this to happen. And I want to thank our congressional delegation, especially Senators Klobuchar and Franken, and our great Congresswoman Betty McCollum, for supporting our efforts to augment the department in this strategic way. We know this will make a difference. Just last week, officers were called to a scene where a person was in crisis and was threatening people in and around a local business. When the officers arrived, the gentleman picked up a tire iron and indicated that he wanted to fight. With time and patience, one of the responding officers, relying on that training he had received, was able to peacefully resolve a tense and dangerous situation and get the individual to a hospital for needed evaluation and treatment. We're also making permanent our investment in our community ambassadors and the department's community engagement unit, because having a department deeply rooted in the community is crucial to its success. Finally, we'll add $750,000 to fully implement the department's body-worn camera program in 2018. We know that body cams help to increase trust and decrease anxiety during altercations with police officers. We're finalizing our pilot program, and I'm proud that by the end of my term, all officers in the city of St. Paul will have body cameras. Beyond public safety, we continue to upgrade technology across the city and continue to modernize our departments. The Department of Safety and Inspections, for example, is modernizing its systems to allow for electronic submittal of construction plans. As St. Paul continues to grow, we must keep pace with how developers and construction companies do business. Such modernization will also support goals like those set forth by the Full Stack St. Paul. For those of you that don't know, Full Stack is the recommendation of the Innovation Cabinet that Councilmember Tobert and I put together earlier this year. It was chaired by Scott Burns. In Full Stack, St. Paul presents an ambitious goal to us: 200,000 square feet of creative office space and 2,000 additional innovation jobs and tech jobs by 2020. In order to support this, I am proposing an initial investment of $300,000 in Full Stack. It will help us process marketing. It will help us recruit. And Full Stack will be led by our Planning and Economic Development Department, along with the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce. But it will be carried out by a coalition of public and private sector partners, all of whom share the goal of building on St. Paul's success in reimagining the last 10 years. In addition to growing our job base in the new economy, we have continued to make investments in our existing small and minority-owned businesses. To enhance those efforts, I'm proposing $750,000 to upgrade commercial vitality nodes, with a particular emphasis on improving conditions for existing businesses at Snelling and Midway. Big things are coming to that neighborhood, and we're going to continue to aid those efforts. I also propose $500,000 for a job opportunity fund to provide capital to small business owners in disadvantaged neighborhoods who are seeking to expand their businesses and provide jobs in their communities. These efforts build on the equity work that remains a strong focus of my administration. We must support the development of real economic opportunities for every neighborhood in the city of St. Paul. We're investing in our libraries and our park programs. In libraries, because we know that the most important year for a child's brain development are the first 3 years of life, we're putting $50,000 into early literacy efforts. Just 30 minutes a day of play, of singing, of talking and reading can make a huge difference in the development of a young mind. We're making it easier for people to access the internet through the library. It's hard for some of us to imagine, but there are still far too many homes in this city and across the state of Minnesota without internet access. A home without the internet is disadvantaged in so many different ways. Imagine searching for a job or trying to help your child do their homework without access to the internet. We're making it easier to go to a library and check out a mobile hotspot. We'll invest in 50 new hotspots, bringing the total complement to 180. And we're making it easier for every single home in the city of St. Paul to have access to the internet. We're investing in our parks programming by adding nearly 200 free activities at rec centers in areas of need across our city. By more than doubling the investment in programming we made last year, we're creating more opportunities for kids to be active and learn new skills all across the city of St. Paul. Finally, we're investing $2.6 million to deal with the emerald ash borer problem. This represents a $1.2 million increase over what we budgeted last year. As Dutch elm did in the 1970s, emerald ash borer will change the landscape of the city of St. Paul. As much as we wish it wasn't impacting our city, it's simply a challenge that came along and has to be dealt with. And just as we have met previous problems, we'll attack emerald ash borer head on with all the resources we can muster. I'd like to take just a few minutes to reflect on the last 12 years of budgets and what they've meant for the city of St. Paul. But I want to start by recognizing our incredible staff that have made this possible. Todd Hurley, the city's finance director, who was preceded by Margaret Kelly and Matt Smith, has provided strong guidance and leadership and a lot of sharp pencils every year. His team has crafted next year's budget as they have done in the past. It begins with the adoption of every yearly budget the next day they go to work. I want to have our incredible budget staff stand and be recognized for their work. Budget Director I want to thank Budget Director John McCarthy. I know Scott Cordes, who was in that position previously, and of course, Director Hurley. Just incredible work, and thank you so much for helping make the City of St. Paul actually work. Over the last 12 years, we've studied our financial ship and put ourselves on the path to a structurally balanced budget. We managed through the Great Recession and the ebbs and flows of local government aid. We made bold investments in the face of criticism, and those investments propelled our city forward. We weathered storms and maintained a AAA bond rating for the last 17 years. The city's tax base continues to grow. Total market value levels are steadily increasing, as is our population. Young families are buying homes in St. Paul. Our neighborhood commercial streets are stronger today than they were 12 years ago. Businesses small and large are choosing to locate in the city of St. Paul and to employ our residents. And we are slowly but steadily building the density necessary to sustain the services we value. University Avenue is thriving as a result of the investment in the Green Line. We're embracing new opportunities at the Ford site and across our city. Downtown is more vibrant today than ever, with the Palace Theater, CHS Field, and a host of new bars, restaurants, and businesses. We knew the value that arts bring to St. Paul, and we invested in things like the Museum of American Art, the Ordway, and the Palace. These cultural centers created economic community development opportunities that we want to make sure occur in all parts of our city. To that end, we have figured out a way to move forward with the Victoria Theater project in the Frogtown neighborhood. Like Jazz Fest and music in the park at Coleman Pavilion, the Victoria Theater will be a place where people of all ages come together for those moments that arts bring, those common community experiences that we gather when we hear a great artist perform. And then hopefully they'll stay to eat, to drink, and spend a little money on University Avenue as long as they're there. The adopted Complete Streets Manual, the citywide comprehensive bike plan, and the current development of a pedestrian safety plan are fundamentally reshaping our city as a more transit, bike, and pedestrian-friendly city. New development is popping in and around our transit investments. St. Paul has become an internationally recognized leader combating climate change. We recently completed an inventory of greenhouse gas emissions and are working to significantly reduce them. In addition to working out, trying to figure out how we can cut vehicle miles traveled, we've supported the installation of solar systems, solar energy systems, reduce the energy load in city buildings, and encourage businesses to adopt energy-saving practices. Neighbors and neighborhoods are picking up the challenge in developing community gardens, promoting composting, and protecting pollinators. If you just look at the list of the Sustainable St. Paul Award winners, you can see how quickly we're adapting to the environmental challenges of our time. And finally, the depth and the breadth of community engagement is greater today than ever before. I like to remind people that when I took office, the door to the mayor's office was locked. Not only has it stood unlocked and open for the last 12 years, people of every station and circumstance have walked through that door and told us what they wanted for their city. Expanding racial diversity around the tables was an important conversation that we have had. It's been a priority of mine throughout these 12 years. And it's clear that having varied life experiences at the tables that we sit around helps shape and influence the conversation and ultimately shapes the outcomes of those discussions. Today, 23% of our city staff are people of color on our way to a goal of 40%. 36% of our appointees to boards and commissions are people of color, and we're working hard to continue to build on this successful trend. The fact of the matter, folks, is for 12 years we have moved the city of St. Paul forward. And I'm proud of the work that we have done. But our work is not done. You know, there's a t-shirt out there that says, "Keep St. Paul boring." Well, it's a little too late. St. Paul stopped being boring a long time ago. The investments that we've made toward our future will expand on just how exciting this city already has become and will continue to be. As I think about the budget decisions I'm proposing for next year, I am certain of only one thing. I won't be the mayor who implements them. This is a little bittersweet for me. I've loved being the mayor of my hometown. I've loved it more than I can really express. I firmly believe that St. Paul is better off today than it was 12 years ago. But ultimately, I've learned so much from all of you. But what it means to be of service and the sanctity of acting on behalf of 300,000 residents in the city of St. Paul, all who have different stories. I'm not running for mayor again, but I'm not leaving St. Paul. This is my home, and I'm going to keep fighting for the values that have brought us thus far: equity, fairness, and hard work. And I'm going to keep on fighting for all of you. But I want to take this one last minute and one last opportunity in my 12th budget address to thank you all for the rare privilege that I have had being your mayor. Thank you so much.
Oh